Everyone, welcome to the Williamsburg City Council meeting of December 11th. Dave, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Ms. Kernshire?
Here.
Mr. Trivett is not going to be able to join us today, but we have our Assistant City Manager, Michelle DeWitt, sitting in. Thanks. Do you have any council purview?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We usually go over the Thursday agenda, and I'll review that quickly for you. Is this the right time? Okay.
Yes.
We have 3 public hearings this Thursday. The first 2 are about the outdoor dining projects on Prince George Street. The first to consider and take action on the design review guidelines that the ARB is proposing for those public areas that will have dining, outdoor dining. The second is for a license requested by the Houndstail to use one of the bump outs for their outdoor dining space. Our third public hearing is about a concurrent resolution about the Historic Triangle Regional Facilities Authority to clean up the resolution so that all 3 localities' resolutions match per state code. So this is a housekeeping item to move forward. We'll then have our typical reports. Unfinished business, we'll hear from Chief Dunn about a construction management services contract with MBP for the police station. And then consideration regarding funding agreement for the Regional Sports Center. And then on to new business, we will have consideration of the Historic Triangle Regional Facilities Authority looking into a live performance venue as its second project. Secondly, some housekeeping from the General Assembly to ensure that the Code of Williamsburg matches the state code when it comes to how you issue public notice for our Wetlands Board. Then we will have consideration of a cooperative service agreement amendment for WATA, and this is for the removal of Colonial Williamsburg from that agreement. And then you'll be considering a contract for wayfinding signage downtown. Next, appointment of a fire marshal, and then consideration of amendment to city code about camping on public property. Lastly, you'll have boards and commission appointments. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Any questions? Okay, it takes us now to public comment, which is an opportunity for anybody in the audience who would like to come forward and address City Council on any matter that's on their mind. Anybody like to come forward? Some thinking. Okay. There will be another opportunity later in the meeting. All right. Takes us now to background presentations. And first is a presentation regarding the proposed design and cost of the Regional Sports Center. Mr. Witt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a stable of experts here with us to present to you, if I can forward this. There we go. I think I'm getting some help from the back room. So this item on your agenda is to look at the proposed design and cost for the Regional Sports Center. And as I noted, we have a stable of experts here to give that presentation and answer questions, but I just wanted to remind everyone how we got here. So the Historic Triangle Regional Facilities Authority is a government entity, and it was formed to do regional projects, to oversee construction and management, and also lease property, purchase property, and do construction of projects, much like other authorities under the state code. So it consists of the CAOs from the 3 localities, and then the Parks and Rec directors or the assistant in those counties as well. So how did we get here? So you'll remember in 2014, the concept of a regional field house was really brought to the community's attention by the Hotel Motel Association in a discussion of how to diversify our tourism assets. And then in 2018, Senate Bill 942 provided a funding mechanism of 1% of the sales tax to the Historic Triangle, half of that going to regional tourism promotion and the other half being sent to the localities where it was collected. The city of Williamsburg chose to take that 0.5% that was collected in the city and create a grant program for tourism investment. In the first round of those grant applications in 2019, the Hotel and Motel Association submitted an application to design and construct a regional sports facility, again to diversify our tourism assets. That was awarded, some funds awarded to do a design and study and then pay for the debt service of construction of such facility. You can see over time, we studied that and better defined the financial needs, formed the authority that I just mentioned prior to this that could undertake that regional effort, and then went through a unsolicited proposal for public-private partnership for the actual design and construction of the building. In May of 2023, the authority executed a ground lease with Colonial Williamsburg for the project to be built on its visitor center property. And then most recently, the authority's been evaluating the responses to an RFP to actually operate the facilities and fine-tuning the finances. And so that brings us here. The authority has voted to accept the design and the proposal, and we're now taking it to each jurisdiction for approval to move forward. So much as I said, MEB and their team is here today. They're the design build contractor. So evaluation of facility operators has happened just this past week, and the authority will be meeting to determine how to move forward there. There is a 40-year lease with Colonial Williamsburg. I'm going to turn it over to the experts. Oh, well, first we have a recommendation. Our recommendation is that we move forward. It's financially feasible. We have positive economic impact. And another part of this that is noteworthy is the community need for recreation facilities. Before we started this process, we knew that our recreation facility needed enhancements for community play and recreation. So this facility will provide that as well as attracting tourism.
Mr. Hibbets, just before you come up, let me just ask you a question, if I could, Mr. Witt. When we did several feasibility studies that looked at the feasibility, but then also the economic impact, and then what kind of money was going to be required to support this. Those studies were done, is that correct?
Yes, sir. We had an economic study done as well as a tourism study about whether it was feasible and would provide the tourism recruitment of sports activities to the region. So both of those studies were done.
As I recall, done twice.
Yes, we did do that twice.
We wanted an update. Okay, thank
And
you.
then had the economic check on what the tourism folks did, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Hibbets, welcome.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We're excited to be at this stage. There's been a lot of effort, a lot of work that's gone into this project, and it's kind of all come to a head in the last few weeks here. And we've been to James City County, we've been to York County, and we're very excited to be here in the city of Williamsburg. We have a big team with us representing most of our partners as part of this process. Been a lot of people involved, and I'd like to first of all thank the authority and the members of that authority and the leadership and guidance and direction that they provided over the last really several months, over a year now, to get us to where we're at. So looking at this first image here, you can get a sneak peek of the facility. And as Michelle noted, this facility really has two purposes. One is to provide quality of life for the residents in the community. And it's going to be big enough and offer enough amenities and programming that it'll support all three jurisdictions. And then the second component is to drive tourism. And that will be done by the size of the facility and the number of courts. So the unique nature of this venue is not only can it provide community enhancements and community program, but it's also going to be able to provide economic impact through sports tourism. Whereas if you build a community rec center, you can't do both. A community rec center will provide quality of life improvements, but it can't drive economic impact. So we'll walk through that today as we go through this presentation. Recap on our team. MEB is the lead design builder. Clark Nexon is the lead architect and engineer. Guernsey Tingle is a consulting architect. Timmons Group is the civil engineer. Henderson is our site and civil contractor and have participated in the pre-construction phase. And Victus is the consultant that has worked on the feasibility study, operations projections, and some fiscal impacts. As previously mentioned, there were a few studies done. HVS out of Chicago also did some studies on the economic impact. Reviewing the schedule of the interim agreement, the project was awarded towards the end of 2022. We got a notice to proceed in March of 2023. There was a design committee that was formed between 2 members of the authority and 2 members of Colonial Williamsburg, and that happened in May. Design really began earnestly in May, and we ran that through August when we submitted our 20% deliverables, and that provided the authority the renderings, floor plans, some schematics that they could approve the project moving forward, as well as some financial data on the cost estimates. Once that was approved, we pushed through to today in our 35% deliverable package, which has been submitted. It includes hundreds of pages of drawings and geotech reports and studies, as well as a cost analysis and a schedule. So looking at the original scope that we were asked to consider, this was part of the RFP. We had a 160,000 square foot building with 12 basketball courts that were convertible to 24 volleyball courts and 36 pickleball courts. So what that adds up to be is about 115,000 square feet of hardwood maple flooring, just under 3 acres. It's a huge area. The key to the 12 courts, that makes it a sports tourism destination center. If you have 4 courts, it's tough to do large sports tourism. If you have 6, same thing. You get to 8, you start to be able to do some larger events. The 12 gives you the national events. Meeting with potential operators, that's one of the big keys. 12 will put this on the map for sports tourism. There's not that many in the country that have 12 or more, and that's a key point for the big national tournaments to draw the big crowds. Everything is ceiling mounted, so all the basketball, volleyball, scoreboards, curtain dividers, it's all ceiling mounted, state-of-the-art systems, which provides easy turnover and operational, lowers operational costs. So within the push of a button and within a few minutes, you can transfer the facility from a basketball facility to a volleyball facility. You can raise it all up and put wrestling mats down. It really helps with the ease of operations and transferring over to other sports. Along with that, we have spaces for referees, meeting rooms, food and beverages, storage areas, office space, first aid, really everything that you need to make this a successful facility and support the main driver, which are the courts. As part of the interim agreement, we were asked to look at some additional items. We were asked to look at 40,000 additional square feet of programming, a conversion turf system, which is a state-of-the-art system, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but it basically allows the facility to go from a court facility to a indoor turf facility. Looking at climbing and rock wall and ninja gym, kind of clip and climb spaces for activities during major events and also during the week. And architectural enhancements to the outside of the building to really make it fit the standard of Williamsburg and in our region. So as previously mentioned, this is being proposed at the Visitor Center at Colonial Williamsburg. And to give some context, on the right-hand side, that road is Colonial Parkway. On the north side of this diagram, this image is Bypass Road. To the south of the image is the Group Arrivals building, and to the left is the Cascades Motel. So what we tried to do is the site was located in an area that would cause the least impacts on the natural areas, the trees, the watersheds, as well as parking, roadways, entrances, trying to be as sustainable as we possibly could while maintaining the existing infrastructure. As we zoom in a little bit here, we really wanted to put a focus on the entry. We wanted this to be an area that was easily visible, as this is the place to come. This is where you're going to get dropped off. This is your first experience that you're going to have walking into this facility. So this gathering plaza, this entry plaza, will be an area that We'll have seating and a lot of natural landscaping where people can kind of take a break, either going before they go into the facility or after the facility, or if they need a break from the squeaky shoes and the whistles going on inside, they could come out here in a nice area outdoors. As part of our interim agreement, we were also asked to look at the whole site. So one of the parameters here was to site the building, the sports center specifically, to allow for future expansion of this area, whether it be an ice facility or aquatics, or whether it be a performance venue or future commercial development opportunities. So that's what our design team did. We ensured that this would allow for future growth of the next stages of development as this project proceeds down down the road. Now, when you look at the big context, Williamsburg is a great spot for an indoor sports center. Most communities are building these to try to drive the other attractions that we already have. So Colonial Williamsburg, Busch Gardens, Yorktown, Jamestown, all these amenities and attractions that people are already coming to our great city for is going to be a bigger draw for these folks. So when they come in for an event and a tournament, these tournament directors will be able to promote all these other assets as ways to draw these big tournaments in, whereas another municipality might not have that advantage. So it's in a great location, a perfect spot for this facility. All right, so now kind of the exciting part. Let's look at the outside of the building, and then we'll work our way around, and we're going to go inside. On the exterior, we really wanted this to set the mark for sports centers, and the authority did too. This was a must-have, was that it set itself apart from other facilities around the country, architecturally speaking. So what you're going to see is the brick and the glass and the wood and the metal brought together to show some nods to historic Colonial Williamsburg, some nods to the Visitor Center campus, but trying to set itself apart from those things and show a modern look at Williamsburg and where the future lies. So as we zoom in a little bit closer, you can see the main entrance into the space, two-story area, nice big glass walls. In the background, you'll see some of those featured climbing areas. Those haven't been completely designed out yet, so you're just seeing some templates. But what it will allow is, as soon as people walk up, they're going to see activity. They're going to see exciting things happening in that facility. And I'll tell you, I've been in these clip and climb areas. I can't get my kids out of them. And quite frankly, I love them too. I spent a couple hours in one in Tennessee, and they're just a blast to be a part of. So I think it's going to be a nice amenity for both the local people and the out-of-town folks that come in. We move around the building, you'll see that common theme of brick and metal, glass and wood. And then we get to the northwest end of the building, which is another unique feature. This is what we're calling the patio and balcony. Again, this is unlike anything I've seen in the country. I've been to about 20 of these facilities from New York to LA. This, from an architectural standpoint, takes the cake. It is the premier facility. And I think what's important about that is it sets the stage for the experience that you're going to have while in Williamsburg, while in this venue. The first thing you see when you pull up sets the stage for what you're going to experience. And it's going to be a higher level of experience compared to other municipalities and other facilities. This is the north end of the building, kind of facing the wooded area. And as we keep going around, you'll see the back of the house where the load in, load out. This area is a pretty critical part of these facilities. When you're bringing in wrestling mats, cheer and gymnastics stages, you got to have big roll-up doors, big spaces where the trucks can get in and out of easily. And our site plan has accomplished that. If I can make this work here. Just a quick little video that puts into context the building. It's a large building. It's about 800 feet long. And so our designers have tried to break that facade up with higher roofs, some glass, some insets, and I feel like they've done a really good job doing that. It breaks up that long facade and then, of course, when you get down here to the end of the building, that's going to be a focus and a feature of that facility. All right, now we're going to go in. So here's an overview of the entire floor plan, first floor plan, and obviously what sticks out is the 12 basketball courts. Again, 115,000 square foot, it's all clear span, so there's no structures that encumber any type of activities that would happen within that space. 12 basketball courts, 24 volleyball courts. The spacing is adequate and provides free play space. So some of these venues, they get a little tight with their courts, and that can cause problems for tournament directors, so this is ample spacing. To the far left in the kind of the light brown, that's that rollout turf system. And again, we'll hit that a little bit further. We're going to zoom in. This is the hub area, the entry into the space. You can see the reception desk right when you walk in the middle of the plan. On the right are those featured gyms where we'll have the Clip and Climb and the family activity centers. To the back right corner is a multi-purpose event space, about 4,500 square feet. That space can be divided up into two, or it can be opened up into the gathering area. This will be great for vendors, promoters, food and dining space, just really flex that area, as well as community and corporate and private events during the week where people can rent that space out and utilize it. Kitchen and servery on the left-hand side of the image with storage and restrooms to the back of the facility, and then office administration towards the front corner and ticket booths and security offices. This is a look at the inside of the facility. To the left is the lobby reception desk. To the right of those gyms. Going towards the back of the image are your food and dining spaces. We move down the corridor, so this is the long side of that building. You'll see some flex spaces, again, large rooms that can be used for a wide variety of events and meetings. Some meeting areas that will provide space for people to kind of hang out, and they call it camping, to camp out in between events. Restrooms and other facility support spaces. So this also has referee changing areas that are dedicated to referees, which are important for these types of venues. Moving up to the mezzanine. So this mezzanine is viewable to the courts below. So what you're seeing in the big box is the courts. So if you're standing up on the mezzanine, you'll be able to look down and see all the activity that's going on down there. There's drink rails on the top, so if you grab some food, you can sit up there and eat and watch the activities below. Going in a little bit closer, more office space, conference room space on the right end of the building. Flex rooms and breakout spaces as we go northwest. Additional restrooms on the upper floor. You can't have enough restrooms in these facilities when you get 5,000 athletes in them. And then some more flex rooms and breakout space, and on the end is the balcony with a large conference room. This will be a great selling feature of the building. They can bring in events rights holders, tournament directors, and say this is where your facility could be, this is what it could look like. It'll be a great space for doing that. Also for recruiting events, coaches and recruiters can hang out in that lobby or in that large conference room and not have to interact with the public, which there's restrictions on that, so that'll be a nice private hospitality area. I want to quickly just go through some of the various layouts of this facility. This is the 12 basketball, 24 volleyball, pretty standard. But as you start to flex the space, you see how valuable this can be. This is a pickleball tournament, 36 pickleball courts. The photo in the bottom right-hand corner is a 11-court facility in Birmingham, Alabama, where they held the National Pickleball Tournament this past year. And they had thousands of participants at it and spectators. It was a huge event. 32 wrestling mats, so the high school wrestling state championships or invitationals that will attract 5,000 or 6,000 athletes plus spectators. Now this is where we get into the turf. So this conversion turf system, in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a facility called the Track at New Balance in Boston. Half that facility has court or turf overlaid on top of their indoor track. The rest has court laid over top of it. So the fact that they can roll it out, have half of it be indoor turf, soccer fields, and the other half could be basketball, creates a very flexible venue during the week that they could use for community programming. This facility would allow 6 basketball courts and, as you can see, a half a football field or maybe 2 small-sided soccer fields. If you roll it out over the entire space, you could have 3 large soccer fields. It can be 1 full pitch field, or you could break it up even into smaller fields and get 4 or 5 soccer fields. And it's big enough to fit an entire football field. So again, this is a massive space that has endless opportunities. So we pulled some data from the HVS study because we thought it was pertinent. It's not our study, but it was done for the city in 2021. And they projected some fiscal impacts and economic impacts, and you can see them up here. 245 sustainable jobs, 42,000 room nights, 560,000 annual visitors, $21 million in economic impact, and as much as $1.3 million in potential tax revenues. Victus Advisors did a pro forma study in 2021 based upon the 160,000 square foot and the program space at that time to show the operating revenues and expenses. And I think something that's key to keep in mind here is it's not just about the revenues and expenses from the venue itself. Also, we have to factor in the economic impact that it has, the tax revenue, the impact it has on hotels and restaurants. This is, again, unique in the fact that a rec center can't produce that economic impact. This one can. It's measurable. You can measure those economics. And then this quarter, Victus was asked to update their projections based upon the new programming, the new square footage, and the new amenities that are in there. They looked at it from two scenarios, includes weekly programming and doesn't include weekly programming. We have members of the Victus team here to discuss this if you have any questions. All right, and probably the part that everyone wants to see the most is the cost. So initially, our scope for the 160,000 square feet was priced at $53,122,000. When we added the scope changes and the cost analysis of that, that added the $26,859,000 to get us to $79,981,000 as a total project cost. And again, we can come back to this if you have any questions. Looking at the schedule, so we're anticipating substantial completion Q1 of 2026. Some of this is contingent upon planning reviews. For example, the ARB, we go in for our final review process tomorrow, so we're hoping that is successful. But other things like funding for the project, obviously that's going to be contingent upon meeting some of these deadlines. But we feel confident that if we can move forward in a relatively short manner, we can accomplish this in Q1 of 2026. And I'll turn the time back over to Assistant City Manager.
Sure. Thank you,
Thank you,
Rick.
Mr. Ibbets.
So the last slide here is about the locality financial commitment that you're considering today. So as Rick presented, the capital cost is $80 million. The city has committed to 64% of the debt service, which is $2.5 million annually. Portion of that coming from your tourism development funds, and you have various options for the remaining portion that we've discussed with our financial advisors. The Historic Triangle Regional Facilities Authority has maintenance of effort funds from that SB Senate bill that was passed for the Historic Triangle tourism tax that amounts to $1.5 million annually. So that's the debt service portion. And now operating subsidy, the authority has been very conservative on the numbers of what it will cost to operate this facility, and they anticipate that there will need to be a subsidy. As has been mentioned, this will provide community recreational facilities as well, so it makes sense in the public policy discussion of how to fund that. So if you're looking at a subsidy requirement, you'll see that it's being proposed that in year one, James City and York County pay what will be half of an $800,000 annual subsidy, and then in years 2 through 5, pay that $800,000 each. So you can see the numbers here on the slide. They may negotiate how they divide that money up, but the total would be $1.6 million annually. Anticipate with our conservative, or with the authority's conservative forecasting, that there will be funds to put into a reserve for future efforts at the facility. And then you can see after those first 5 years of operation, things should balance out to a operating subsidy between $300,000 and $800,000 a year, years 5 through 30. And so the remaining steps are to provide this proposal from the authority to each locality, so it's here today in front of the city, and then seek approval by each authority, and then execute a comprehensive development agreement with MEB to include a guaranteed maximum price for the construction of the facility. So we've just given you a tremendous amount of information, so we are happy to answer questions as council desires.
And just to be clear, Ms. DeWitt, we're going to be voting on this Thursday. So today's presentation is an opportunity to hear from the team of folks that put this together, Ms. DeWitt, and so we can ask some questions. And so I guess I want to, if I could, Mr. Hibbets, just talk about the value of that flex space. If the facility were smaller, I think I understand that that makes us less competitive. And so making it larger allows us to attract more folks in. But does it also then allow it to be more flexible? And then how does that work? How does that play into the scheme of more successful?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key to these facilities is flexibility. That's the key. And whether that's on a tourism standpoint or a local use standpoint. So to address the tourism standpoint, the three steps, the open gym premieres, these event operators are the first question they ask, well, how many courts do you have? Because then that helps them determine, well, how many teams can we bring in? And that drives how much revenue they can make. So the fact that Williamsburg can say, well, we have 12 courts, it's going to be a huge deal. When you compare that to, Rocky Mountain, who has 8, or, Myrtle Beach, who has 8, that's going to win the day on those larger events because you've got enough space to bring those in. For a 12-court facility, you might be looking at 150 to 175 basketball teams coming in for a big event. So you got 12 basketball players per team, plus their coaches and staff. The numbers start adding up quickly to thousands of people. So having that flexibility is key. The other part of that is you might be able to hold a smaller basketball tournament and a volleyball tournament at the same time because you could break the courts up into half and host simultaneous events. And that's, again, the unique nature of these facilities and making them flexible. And then when it comes to community use, you could have dodgeball going one night, on the same night as basketball and volleyball. I mean, I've played at the Quarter Path Rec Center, and, it's hard to find a gym, it's hard to get in, it's hard to, get a team together because there's just not enough court space. So this would allow that to happen all the way from little kids all the way to older adults. So I think that flexibility is key. Then you factor in the rollout turf, and that's a whole nother dynamic that I'm not sure there's not another municipal facility in the country that has that component. So again, flexibility is key and important to these facilities.
Then also in terms of flexibility, it brings a market that we don't serve. For example, the pickleball. I mean, to be able to do 48 pickleball courts. I did play recently for the first time, and used to be a doctor's office in the facility as well.
Yeah.
Made my knees just a little sore. But then that opens the door for additional markets.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, things like fencing, cheer and gymnastics, and a lot of these sports are high-spending demographics, and they come in and they stay the night, they eat at restaurants. There's a whole group of activities out there. Cornhole, one of the sports centers just had a huge cornhole tournament. So it really opens up the door for flexibility.
In terms of economic feasibility, you had mentioned that the study we have done, I think we did it twice. I think one of the important points that you made is that these facilities in themselves don't make money, just like a museum or a performance venue. So where the win for the community is, it's the residual spending that happens in the lodging facilities and in the restaurant facilities.
And I think that the unique nature of the three municipalities coming together in a partnership is they can save money by not having to build other rec centers that don't drive that economic impact, but they can build one that does. And you're exactly right. It's that residual spending that's going to really make this worth the investment. That's how you measure the return on your investment, is by all that money that's generated through, tourism.
Do you recall if in those studies they talked about, so we have more folks coming to town to stay in restaurants and eat, or stay at hotels and eat in restaurants. I don't think the study calculated the investment that those hotels would be making in themselves, or potentially new product coming to the market, new hotels or new restaurants. Was that part of the study?
It was not. There's a multiplier effect with this, and those studies only went to a certain point, but they can then take that to the next level to show what those multiplier effects are, because that's what happens. Whether it's an older hotel sees the foot traffic that's coming in, they decide to renovate it or maybe build a new one, it drives that economic development because of the amount of foot traffic that's coming in and the money that's being spent.
Thank you.
But those studies did not include that.
Okay, good. Mr. DeWitt, in terms of funding, so I think what I heard you say is the money for debt service is being met through the two sources of fund, just for the debt service, would be the grant program that we created using the half of the sales tax that came in through the Historic Triangle Tourism. And then a portion of funds that automatically come as a result of that legislation to that, to the HTRFA. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So we're not looking at raising taxes to make this happen. Okay. And again, to Mr. Hibbett's point, kind of there's lots of things to be excited about. I know I certainly am, but just the opportunity to work collaboratively with James City County and York County to build this facility and support this facility so that it's, everybody in the tri-community area can take advantage of it is a great opportunity. So thank you. Mr. Vice Mayor, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, first of all, thank you for the presentation and to the board and all the partners that have got us to this point. And it seems like we've been talking about this for an extremely long time. So I'm glad we're to this point. My first question is similar to what the mayor said. And I recall even when this idea first came to City Council and we had a presentation similar to what we see in the media from Virginia Beach, I believe the headline the next day said, Sports Center to lose money, or something similar to that. So you've pointed out how we overcome that. It's not the venue itself that's making the money. However, in this region, Virginia Beach has had a lot of negative publicity about their sports center. How do you see this venue similar, and how do you see this venue as different than what we see in all the media about Virginia Beach?
Yeah, and I'll actually let Brian Conley from Victus take that question. So Brian is also the consultant on the Virginia Beach facility as well, from the conception all the way through. So that's where we developed a partnership. I think you mentioned one of the differences is the transparency that we're going into this understanding that the venue's going to lose money from a revenues and expenses standpoint, but you got to look at the bigger picture. And I think that's one key difference that maybe didn't get broadcasted as well as it should have with Virginia Beach. But I'll let Brian speak more to it.
Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me. I'm Brian Connolly with Victus Advisors. As Rick mentioned, we have been the consultant for the city as well as the authority over the last 3 years now on market demand and financial feasibility for this project. We've also been working with the city of Virginia Beach since about 2018 on the Virginia Beach Sports Center. I think we had a slide that had some information about Virginia Beach. So obviously there's been a lot of information in the news in the last couple of weeks about Virginia Beach terminating the operator that they selected to operate the Virginia Beach Sports Center. There's two ways that we look at this. Number one, the reason that facility was built was for economic impact, and in particular hotel nights. All of the funding going to build the approximately, $60 million or so facility at the time came from the tourism funds that are generated within the resort area. So from an economic impact standpoint, it's been extremely successful. We projected about 35,000 or so incremental hotel nights associated with that project back in 2018. And this past year, it generated over 50,000 hotel nights just off of the sports center. So from an economic impact standpoint, it's been extremely successful. From an operation standpoint, it's different from this project for one primary reason, which Rick mentioned. When we did the studies for that facility, we also projected an operating deficit. The city then had proposers submit operating proposals to operate the facility. There were 3 proposals submitted. 2 of those 3 also projected an operating loss. The third one did not. We were part of the team that was reviewing those proposals. The one that said they could make money, we tagged that as a red flag. For one reason or another, City Council decided to select the operator that said it could make money. The operator also said that they would put in private investment into the project, which ended up being them taking out a loan to purchase the FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment that went into the building. That's basically everything that turns this building into a sports center. The sports equipment, all of the elements around it. So, which is also something we don't recommend when you have a public facility and the things that make it what it is are owned by an operator that's on a short-term contract. So the facility opened. Pretty quickly, it became clear that that operator was not making money. And they were reporting each of the last 2 years, they reported about $1.3 million in operating losses each year is what they reported. But when you look closely at it, about half of that operating loss was depreciation expense that they were charging on the FF&E that they owned. So that's just it's not a cash expense. So that leaves about another $650,000. Their management fee that they negotiated directly with City Council was paying them over $650,000 a year in management fees and incentive payments, which is about 3 times higher than what the average is for similar facilities in terms of what's paid to operators. So if you back out of that 1.3 million loss, if you back out the depreciation expense, and then you adjust the management fee down to what we would consider a industry standard management fee, you'd look each of those years at about a $200,000 to $300,000 operating loss. And so we feel like the projections we've put together are pretty conservative in that I think we're showing, depending on the operating scenario, in the range of $400,000 to $500,000 operating loss. We did not do the economic impact analysis in this study. HVS from Chicago was hired so that there was an extra set of eyes to run an economic impact model off of our operating projections, and they projected about 42,000 hotel nights. So I think we've been conservative, and we've also been very clear with the city who hired us first, and then the authority, the proper ways to plan, what the expectations are for an operator, what industry standards are for operating fees and things like that, so that the financial proposal that was ultimately put together and that was just shown to you, you can see that the counties are pre-funding a reserve. They're hopefully, overpaying at first so that when it gets beyond year 5, they can actually scale back their payments to a certain extent because there's enough of a reserve built up for the authority to feel comfortable that that's sustainable. So,
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation, and I think the key is transparency, and I really appreciate the detail in pointing out the differences in the two facilities, because we would definitely, I know this council would definitely want to be transparent and not mislead people that there's some expectation that the facility itself is going to make money when we know it's not. And this question may be for you as well. So my next question was, I know there's been some anxiety in the community about the lease agreement, the 40-year lease agreement, and what safeguards are there in the lease agreement to protect the communities, the localities?
I'll let Rick handle that one.
Okay.
I'm going to somewhat defer this question too. We're not privy to the lease agreement as the contractor, so that's kind of a tough question for us to answer specifically.
I'm Robin Hanson.
Yeah, thank you for coming forward, Ms. Hanson.
I'm Robin Hanson. We are Sands Anderson, Dan Siegel, and our counsel to the authority. And we did work with Colonial Williamsburg with the lease. It is a 40-year lease with 2 10-year options to extend. And we didn't buy the property, we leased the property. And so after 60 years, the lease is over. Doesn't mean you can't renegotiate later, but I guess that, do you have further questions beyond that?
So during that first initial 40-year lease period, what protection is there for the localities? There's no way that the lease can just be terminated?
No, I mean, it's you know, if somebody, I mean, I can't guarantee you that somebody wouldn't default under the lease. If we didn't pay the rent under the lease, then we've got trouble. But assuming everything goes as planned, we've got a 40-year lease with 10-year options to extend.
Yeah, the landlord certainly can't come in and just arbitrarily
No.
evict us. I mean, we're protected by the lease, both.
We're protected, right?
Right.
We are protected
It's a
by
matter
the
of
lease.
defaulting, I'm sorry. to
And
interrupt.
certainly there's no way we could afford this facility if we had to purchase that property to build the facility, and that's why we're leasing it. And we have to trust that all the legal protections in place for the locality in that 40-year lease. So they, as the mayor mentioned, they just can't arbitrarily end our lease, and then
Correct.
they end up with our building.
We negotiated hard for the authority on the lease with Colonial Williamsburg. And I think everybody bargained in good faith, and we're working together, and it is a 40-year lease and 10-year options to extend, so, and we don't start paying rent until we start, the permit goes, that's the rent commencement date, is when we get the permits for building, so,
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
you're
Hanson.
And the last thing was just on, I think, as you pointed out, Rick, one of the things that gets overlooked is the community space that it provides, where we know we had been in discussions. Michelle had mentioned earlier in her presentation that we'd been in discussion some time ago about, improvements to our, or additions to our recreational to quarter path to accommodate the sports, and I'm sure the other localities are in a similar situation. So I think that often gets overlooked in this. It's more about people focus on the big events and forget about the community events. So I'm glad you pointed that out earlier. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Definitely, thank you. And just to point out, there's a slide here with some of the information that Brian was discussing about some of the metrics at Virginia Beach Sports Center. So you can see the $650 in annual management incentive fees, $650 for depreciation of expenses. Out of the 6.1 that they owed, 4.6 of it is to buy back that equipment because they need that equipment to function, and 1.5 of it is to pay unpaid bills that the operator did not pay to events right holders. So, obviously the devil's in the details, and it tends to work out, but from a goal standpoint, that facility is succeeding. If you ask the hoteliers and the restaurants, they love it down there. They're thrilled with it, so.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the presentation and obviously the heaps of work that have gone in from so many people in getting it to this place. And I appreciate all the detail. And sort of zooming out from a particular example like Virginia Beach, because certainly we hear about that. But looking a little bit more broadly, because you mentioned you have been to many different types of facilities like this. And so I'm wondering, what are some lessons learned at other places that, let's say just haven't been successful, that you see, that you think, oh, that's a mistake that other localities made, and we're trying to rectify that mistake in this project. So I'm really interested in what makes this proposal better than other places in a way that it actually proactively tries to head off perhaps some of the disappointments and failures that other localities may have had.
Yeah. And I could definitely speak from design and construction and some operational because of the facilities that I've toured. That's really why we toured them, because we wanted to figure out lessons learned and figure out what went right and what went wrong. And it was interesting. I was in Birmingham looking at a comparable venue that's been open since 2017, I believe. And so they built it kind of out in the middle of nowhere, hoping to drive, economic development, which now it has started to do. There's 3 hotels that are going up adjacent to it. But historically, these were paid for by the private sector, and they were built out in the middle of nowhere. And what they realized is that they were too expensive to pay for from a day-to-day standpoint, and they were so far away from anything that it wasn't driving economic impact. So cities and localities started realizing that we could pay for them, we got to put them in the right spot, and then we could generate that economic impact, which is now the transition of what's happened. And so making sure the facility is designed and operated accordingly and in the best way is key. Taking lessons from, the Virginia Beach operating agreement or the way that a facility is designed. For example, a venue that might not have ceiling-mounted basketball, volleyball stanchions, where it takes a half a day or a full day to turn the building over. Well, now you lose all that time in that facility that could be used for community programming or an event. So things like that are very critical to making them successful, making sure that there are no columns in the middle of the facility. I think the jurisdictions have done a phenomenal job of really vetting this thing out and researching it, studies after studies. I mean, we've seen it's been since 2014 that this has been contemplated. So I think the research has been done, the vetting has been done. From a design build perspective, we've looked at all the different avenues that make them successful and don't make them successful. For example, some of these venues built a ton of team rooms initially because they thought every team that came in there needed to have a team room to meet in. Well, what they found out is no, that didn't work. They'd end up being storage areas because the teams, as soon as they're done, they tell them to go get some Gatorade, meet back in 20 minutes for the next game. Same thing with locker rooms. No one used the locker rooms because they come ready, they come from the hotel ready to play. When they leave, they don't want to go shower in a locker room. They want to go back to the hotel and dress. So it's all those little things that our team as a whole, including the authority, has really vetted out over this process to try to get right here. And I feel really confident that we're on a right model with it.
Thank you. And my other question, which I'll get here in a second, just bear with me, kind of echoing what the mayor laid out, that with respect to the city, the proposed agreement here is that the city would pay $2.5 million annually to service the debt on the construction and the cost of that, with half of that at least, we'll see, that would have to be hashed out, how much of that would come from the TDF, and then what might have to be the rest from the city budget, correct? Am I right so far?
Well, so correct me if I'm wrong, so the TDF is what's going to fund this.
Right.
Wholly, so there's not general funds that
Okay.
we would have to then budget for to support this.
Okay,
Because of the legislation, and I forget the amount, but some of the Historic Triangle tax goes automatically currently to the HTRFA to support that debt service.
right. Okay, so kind of echoing the point that we're not looking at raising taxes in order to pay for this, that kind of the point. But it is really a question of a benefit that the community is getting from the funds being spent in this way. So I do understand absolutely that there is the projections on how much of the indirect of the expenditures that would, the revenues that would come in from the tourism that this would hopefully drive and generate. And then kind of turning to some of the costs that we might have to face as a community that would actually be incorporated into a facility such as this. So I don't know, perhaps this is a question for the assistant city manager, but do we have a little bit more of an idea of the types of things that we would need to invest in for community recreational purposes that would actually be covered by this kind of facility?
Great question. I will ask our Parks and Rec Director, Robbie Hutton, to come talk about that.
Welcome, Ms. Hutton. Hopefully Michelle didn't surprise you.
Michelle's always full of surprises. That's why we love her. So we're excited about this opportunity because it would put all of our programming under one roof. So for instance, like with our youth basketball program, we currently have 61 teams, and we'll be looking to add another 20 after the first of the year for the older kids. And so we're having to staff right now five different locations for that one program. So if we're all under one roof, we can scale back on some of that staffing. But the facility will come with the equipment that we need, talking about the volleyball stanchions and the basketball goals that will drop down from the ceiling. So that stuff is going to be awesome, right? It's going to save us a lot of time with staffing to have to manually set all that up. So it's going to be a great, smooth transition.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to hear, and I hope, to just, again, sort of highlight that this is not we want to invest in our recreational infrastructure, and if there's a way, that we can really kind of think about how this investment of the sports complex facility benefits, the local recreational facilities that we have, and how this is the community good
Yeah,
reaches into there.
And it's going to allow us, it's going to afford us the opportunity to provide so much more programming that we currently can't do because we just don't have the infrastructure.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Another way, Councilwoman, to answer that would be the existing facility that Robbie operates at Quarter Path Rec Center would need improvements, expansion to meet the needs of the community. So the funds will not be required in the CIP to do that effort at the Quarter Path Rec Center with this regional sports center.
Thank you.
Ms. Ramsey?
Thank you, Rick, for the presentation, and I too am excited about this moving forward after so many years of discussion. I have a few questions that probably sort of piggyback on what some of the others do, including a couple for Robbie. I tried to catch her eye before she got back to her seat, but anyway, so I'll ask you, we talked about Virginia Beach, but I know that there are other complexes that have been built in the area. I think the most recent is Richmond, which I know has basketball courts. I don't know what else it does. And I think Vice Mayor Dent was, asking, so really what would set this apart from, say, Richmond, Virginia Beach in terms of options, facilities? Do they have that turf rollout? How many courts do they have? Do they have the drop-down, automatic drop-down, things like that?
Yeah, so Henrico County Sports Center does have the drop-down system. They do not have a turf system. They don't have the featured gym areas that we're proposing, which really provides an amenity for siblings during these tournaments and events. So a lot of times you'll bring, or you might not bring, siblings based upon what's at that venue because maybe there's just nothing for them to do but just sit there. So that space allows probably the whole family to now travel, which means more spending, more opportunity. And to me, the real differentiator is what's already here, what's around the community. Colonial Williamsburg is going to be a great asset that a lot of these people who are coming for a basketball, volleyball, wrestling tournament may not come otherwise. They might not have a reason to come to this area, but this facility is going to draw them in and put them at the doorstep of CW, of Busch Gardens, and that's going to be an attraction. When these event promoters are trying to attract teams and directors to come, they utilize that, and they'll say, well, look, you could stay an extra day and go to Busch Gardens, or you can come an extra day and go to Water Country. It's going to be a big selling point for them, whereas some other facilities might not have that same existing amenities and attractions and infrastructure. It's really becoming an experience. They call them tournications, so it's no longer just a tournament, but they're actually creating vacations around these big tournaments because they're going to go and they're going to be there for days, so they might as well have a lot to do. And that's the advantage that Williamsburg has. The facility's going to be top-notch. It's going to have all these amenities that other facilities don't, and that's going to make it even better. But it's what's already here. I think that's the key and the differentiator.
Well, just 2 points to that. I volunteered at a softball tournament that Williamsburg hosted a number of years ago, and the person sitting next to me was saying that, she takes her kids elsewhere to places that were out in the boonies, and there was nothing else around. And she commented to say a few years ago that Williamsburg offers different amenities. Even if you don't do them when you're here for the tournament, you're exposed to them so that you would come back at another time. And I remember reading about the Christiansburg Natatorium, that when they built it, they thought, well, they'll come. Well, the people came, but they weren't prepared because they didn't have the infrastructure with hotel rooms to support it. So we do have both of that already here. So I did have a couple questions for Robbie, and then I'll get back to you. So I just wanted to confirm, you said that I got the feeling that currently we have to manually lower all of the nets and change everything anytime programming changes. And you did mention new programming. Is there anything specifically that you get asked for that we're unable to offer because we don't have the space, the expertise, or staffing for?
Sure, with that rollout turf, I mean, we could branch out and do, soccer, we can do flag football, we can ultimate frisbee. So the rollout turf is really a game changer to what we're able to offer. And with the flexible space, I mean, I don't want to sound, like you hear this all the time, but the possibilities are really endless. Because right now we are only able to offer basketball, volleyball, pickleball. That's all we can have indoor.
And I guess one advantage too of all of these extra add-ons, particularly with the turf, it would all be climate controlled.
Sure.
So you wouldn't have to worry about rain or heat
That's
or
correct.
humidity or anything like that. And you mentioned pickleball, and I know that it continues to be that growing sport. I don't understand why, but it does. And I know that you've been able to host some tournaments, but I would think there's far more competition now for a facility. So how are we doing as far as recruiting those tournaments at this point?
Yep, so pickleball tournaments now are everywhere. You can find one any weekend. And we only have 6 pickleball courts. And so we can only have about 150 people at a time. And what we're finding is that these pickleball enthusiasts are traveling to other states that have more courts.
Yeah, I know someone went to Arizona for a Masters tournament. So, well, thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't want to take up too much more time, but Rick, just wanted to ask about, well, the weekly programming. So how would that be determined as far as splitting among the jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think they're that's probably a better Robbie question.
Okay,
So the community use would be Monday through Thursday for the most part. And right now, York County, James City County, and Williamsburg, we work cooperatively instead of in competition. So the sports that we run are not the sports that James City County runs. So it will, again, be a smooth transition, and we continue to plan that same operation.
okay. Thank you. And I guess just one last thing for Rick, when we've talked about, the addition of hotel nights of Virginia Beach, we can't forget that every hotel night generates taxes for us, part of which goes back to cover general fund expenses, and part which goes to fuel more tourism product.
Absolutely, and meeting with an operations group, one of their keys is that their biggest time of the year is late spring and summer when they do their biggest tournaments. And a place like Virginia Beach struggles with getting hotel room nights down there. The rates skyrocket. They're all booked up anyway. So I think that Williamsburg provides a climate and an opportunity to really attract some of those big summer events. And then you get people really piggybacking off of vacations because kids aren't in school. So I think that opportunity is a game changer in Williamsburg.
Yeah, because our occupancy rate doesn't get close to 100%, even in the summer.
A couple times a year, but no, I think we have about 51% now. Just piggyback on that, when you look at that city's finance, and I know that there's not always a correlation to $1 spent in hotels is $2 in restaurants, but you look at the numbers in our financials, you'll see that restaurants outpace meals 2 to 1, just about. And so if you apply that multiplier forward to lodging, you can almost get an expectation of what would be spent on meals.
So, sorry to take up so much time.
That's fine.
Your turn, Caleb.
Rick, thank you for this presentation, as well for your partners at MEB. I recognize how much work goes into these designs, that video. It's always funny to me how every design I have seen, it seems to have just rained, but then it's a sunny day. So the facility looks fantastic. Obviously, it is an expensive one, so we have a lot of questions for it, but it is exciting to think of at least the position we're in, potentially making this a possibility. So I have some operational questions, one on the forecasted revenue from it, and then one for our assistant city manager, but it won't be too many. The first is, so you mentioned that countrywide, there aren't many facilities which can say they have 12 basketball courts, plus the flex facility, plus space for siblings, right? Can you give us an idea of numbers, whether in Virginia or probably more likely maybe East Coast, how many facilities of that caliber there are?
So there's a facility in Georgia that has 12 courts, but they have 0 amenities. In fact, their food and beverage is completely lacking. That's another good point to bring up. A food and beverage inside the facility is crucial and key because a lot of times these families are in there for 8 hours, and it's hard for them to get out. Now, when dinner comes, they all break out and they go into restaurants and they go spend money in the community. But having a good source of food and beverage is key there. Virginia Beach has 12 courts. Henrico has 12 courts. So ironically enough, 2 of the other 12 court facilities are right here. Spooky Nook in Pennsylvania can go up to about 16 courts. Some of the challenge with Spooky Nook, it was built in a warehouse years ago. It was one of those private investments. It is in the middle of nowhere. It's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. When we went to tour that one, we thought we were never going to get there. But it was one of the kind of the first of these sports tourism venues. They also have court spacing issues. So their courts are really tight together. They actually have to drop down nets in between the courts for free play area. And that can be a challenge when hosting these big events. Flooring is another thing. So they have vinyl flooring on some of their courts, and that's mainly for field hockey. But basketball players don't like playing on vinyl. They like to play on wood floor. So that presents some challenges there as well. So I would say there's maybe four or five on the East Coast that have 12 courts, none that have the conversion turf system, and very few that have the amenities that go with it to support that event.
You mentioned a thing there around court space, and so in looking at the design, I also had a question around locker rooms. I know sometimes there's, if we have a real estate development for number of units, there might be a number of parking spaces required. Same might go for those which are handicap spaces. And I'm curious a little bit around the math of, by some estimates, around like volleyball tournaments, there could be 2,000+ players in, and I remember being a kid competing in some of these tournaments, and you might have a whole day where you go back to the hotel, you might just have an hour where you're just hanging around the facility. So it looks like there were less locker rooms than I'd expect. I'm not an expert in this. Can you help me understand the locker room capacity?
There's actually 0 locker rooms except for the referees, because these facilities time and time again have tested out that they don't use them. They don't use the locker rooms. The kids don't want to be, dressing in the same rooms as each other. It's just not what they get. In fact, the 2 or 3 that we went to that had locker rooms, they were being used for storage. That's what they were being used for. And we would always ask, what do you wish you would have done or not done? And it was always, we don't need the team rooms and we don't need the locker rooms. And so after 6 or 7 times of hearing that, we realized there's just no need. They come ready to play. They leave at the end of the day. They go either back to their hotel rooms or their homes and shower. So it's just a cost that's not needed. Now, an ice hockey facility, if you've got 2 ice rinks, you do need locker rooms for those. Or an aquatic center, you're going to be required to have locker rooms. It's just these types of events don't use them. And so it's just one of those costs that's not needed.
Okay. One last question before a question maybe for Victus, if they're still here. I'd just be remiss seeing a building that's going to have a brand new roof and 3 acres of roof space to ask about the potential for sustainability facility-wide, but then also potentially solar on the roof. So I recognize we're very early in the design process here at 35%. Can you give us a feel when MEB may bring in the sustainable options for the facility and including solar on the roof?
Yeah, I think we're looking at some of those options. The issue with these big roofs, it's a clear span. And the weight that is put up there by the basketball, volleyball, scoreboards, it's significant. Not only the weight of itself, but a basketball goal has to have a 400-pound safety factor for someone hanging on them, and they have to have that factor on every single goal at the same time. So when it comes to designing them, that weight, that load on the ceiling, that roof is incredibly critical. So it's already beefed up quite a bit to sustain all that, so adding solar panels is really not economical because it drives the price so high on the structure itself. It counters the benefit of coming from solar. Some of the smaller roofs, that could be something we look at, but what we're trying to do is build the facility as sustainable as we possibly can, given the cost parameters.
And I recognize too, you said that inside the facility, support beams are going to be in the middle of volleyball courts and basketball courts. So you're limited in what you can do
Yep.
as far as support inside the building.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Rick. I saw Brian leave. Is there someone from Victus?
No, he actually,
He had to
he was
run.
thinking this was a 3 o'clock meeting. His flight leaves in Richmond
Oh, okay.
very shortly, so he's trying to get back.
No
But I can
problem.
try to ask, or answer any questions you might have. And
Well,
if not,
it was on their forecasting, there was a slide around the difference in income if it was programmed by a operator versus programmed by the locality. It almost looked like this slide. So scenario 1 and 2, can you just describe includes programs versus no programs? I'm surprised it's I guess a less net income with no programs, but I wasn't sure exactly what buckets those fit into as far as who's programming.
So really what this breaks down to is what type of venue is it? A lot of these big sports tourism events, they don't do weekly programming. They're just concerned about the events on the weekend. Whereas there's opportunity to do what we call a hybrid model, and that's what we're proposing here, is during the week, it's operated by Parks and Rec. It's leased out to maybe travel basketball or travel volleyball teams that will come in there and rent the space out. So when you talk about includes programming, that's that revenue generated through renting that space out during the week as opposed to just on the weekends.
So Robbie, that's the Monday through Thursday. It'd be less of a net loss because of that ability to rent it out 4 of 7 days a week to local entities. Okay, which adds to the benefit of the facility at large. Okay, great. All right, thanks, Rick. And then one last question, Michelle, for you. On the operating and capital costs of the facility, I don't want it to be easily confused that while we and James City County and York County will all be paying in yearly to the overall cost of the facility, it looked as if that we have no operating cost expenditures, but we are taking on the debt service of the capital costs. And so I just wanted to make that clear that this slide, the early years and the continuation of the facility, there wouldn't be an operating cost for the city.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Follow-ups? All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hibbets and Michelle. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to the whole team for putting together what I think is a gorgeous facility that's going to ultimately make a great difference in our community. So, as I said earlier, we will be having a discussion on how to move forward on this on Thursday. Good. All right, takes us now to presentation regarding the proposed live performance venue as a project for consideration by the HTRFA.
Thank you,
Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to tell you how we got here, you'll remember back in 2021 with the city's ARPA funding that was received due to the COVID pandemic, the council decided to set aside earmark funds for a live performance venue. So that was the first step, one of the first steps in this project. Just last month, City Council awarded tourism development grant funding to move forward with design and feasibility and then potentially debt service for a performing arts center, a live performance venue. And that was a result of MEB and Clark Nexon proposing construction of this facility as part of the Tourism Development Fund project. So that was recommended for approval and then approved by City Council. So now we're at the point of next steps to start to move forward looking into that facility being built. You saw on the site plan earlier that it would be built adjacent or near the indoor sports complex. As it turns out, the Historic Triangle Recreation Facility Authority's process to consider the sports center, the PPEA, also included the potential of a live performance venue. So that would enable the authority to go ahead and consider a live performance venue moving forward on that if they choose to. So staff is recommending today that City Council forward an official request to the authority, ask that they go ahead and undertake the first steps of looking into the feasibility cost design of a live performance venue, much in the same way that the sports regional facility moved forward. So having introduced it, I will now turn it back over to Rick to explain some of the details.
I'll try to make this quick so you guys don't have to keep hearing from me today. But again, very excited about this opportunity as well. Let's see if we can move forward. So part of our original submission on the Sports Center included a performance venue, and we felt like this would be a nice complement to the Sports Center and something that doesn't really exist out there in the market. It's starting to happen. People are starting to realize the synergies between entertainments, sports, and music and concerts. And the idea to capitalize on that. But we 3 years ago started looking at how that would fit into the overall site plan. And we put that as part of our submission. So we're going to talk a little bit about the team, some comparable venues, because the key here is you're going to hear a term that I'm going to use, hybrid venue, and we'll explain a little bit more. I'll explain more about what that means, but basically it's indoor and outdoor capabilities. We'll walk through some comparable venues, we'll look at the project overview, and then talk about some of the benefits. It's actually the same team, pretty much as the Sports Center, which provides some significant cost and savings opportunities and time. The only exception is we have added a couple of consultants to our team with Virginia Arts Festival and I Am Going, just to make sure that we're looking at the venue from an operational standpoint and the long-term layout and design. So part of our research, we started looking at what defines a hybrid venue, what are some examples of those, what's different about them, what's similar about them, and what might work here in this market. Initially, when we first proposed, we were potentially looking at just an outdoor. But what we've heard from the community is that there's a need for indoor space here. Williamsburg is culturally rich. We all know that. There's great performing arts groups, orchestras, symphonies, ballets, operas, theaters. It's about as rich for a community as you can get. The challenge is there's not a home venue for those. There's not a facility to call home. So we wanted to then figure out, well, how can we balance outdoor and indoor and make it work? So part of that led to a tour that we went on. We ended up seeing about 6 or 7 venues that all had a different form or fashion, a way to do hybrids. And we ended up settling, or at least focusing our efforts on a couple of those. So we'll talk about those today. This is called the Astro in La Vista, Nebraska. Now keep in mind, this is more of a commercial rock facility, but the bones and the concepts and the logistics are very on point for what we're trying to do. This is just outside of Omaha, and it is an indoor-outdoor venue that has an outdoor stage and an indoor stage, and they share back of house and different amenities. So this is a rendering of the outdoor space. This is a rendering of the indoor space. A lot of flex seating. I think the inside they can seat up to 1,700 people. Outside they're in the 3,000 to 4,000 range, depending on if it's GA, so if it's just general admission standing room, or if they put seats out there. Again, similar to the Sports Center, flexibility seems to be key in some of these venues, and that defines the hybrid venue in itself. Looking at a site plan, as you can see, lot 13, which is basically in the middle of the image, is the indoor portion of the Astro. To the left of that, where it says music venue, that's the outdoor stage and outdoor seating area. It is part of a mixed-use development. The city is building a really nice park, and private investment has built mixed use to the right of this facility. I was there about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they were getting close to completion. They actually hosted their first indoor show a week ago, and there's some pictures starting to pop online with it. It looks like it was a great performance and a great show. They've been doing outdoor shows since August. But they were getting close, and this is a view from the mezzanine level looking down over the stage. This is a view from the stage looking out towards the seating area. Again, this facility elected to do some flex space down below where they can have standing room only, or they can have seating. They bring in flexible seating. I think you'll see a little bit later, we've got maybe a different variation of what the inside could look at based upon what types of events and programming will happen here in Williamsburg. This is a view of the outdoor stage before a concert as they're getting ready to set up. This is a picture I took, again, when I was out there, so they're still kind of finishing up some things, but they can put a lot of chairs out there, and they've hosted a number of events already, large-scale concerts. And then this is more of an intimate feel. So the benefit of not having 3,000 fixed seats is you can create a venue that maybe, or an event that might have 500 people at it. It feels intimate, it feels right without having a bunch of empty seats. This is the Andrew J. Brady facility in Cincinnati. A little bit different model. They've got the outdoor pavilion right there in the middle that's connected via the parking deck area to the indoor facility on the left-hand side. This is a much larger facility. They seat about 3,500 on the inside. So as we move to the inside, you'll see it's much bigger than probably what we're anticipating here. But a lot of the usage and the way that they laid it out and design, we took a lot from it, especially the back of house. This is an example of an indoor show and an outdoor festival. And then this is Megacorp right across the river from Cincinnati in Kentucky. Again, a different twist on it. Indoor venue, outdoor venue with an operable wall in between. So one stage, it does present some challenges with some of your flexible components. You basically have to do one of the other. There will be opportunities to do some music festivals, and if you have 2 stages, you could incorporate 2 stages. And maybe playing them at different times, but setup and takedown and turnover can be assisted with 2 separate stages. This is the Nashua Performing Arts Center, Nashua, New Hampshire, and this is where I get into the inside a little bit more. So they've done a better job of trying to look at it from a performing arts standpoint and what that fit and finish would look like inside. So as we're analyzing the various components of this, this is what we're starting to gravitate towards more toward the inside. Maybe not the way that it's designed, but the look, the fit, the feel, the finish. This facility actually has these retractable seats, which again, we'd like to talk about state of the art. Those seats can retract all the way back in, providing some floor space, or they can come out and providing nice raked viewing areas for performances. So we have not been to this venue. It's on my list to go see at the beginning of the new year. This is open and operational. It's been open for about 9 to 10 months. There is no outdoor component to that. That's specifically just looking at the indoor. So when we look at our specific project, we can look at the site plan here. You see the sports center and the performance venue kind of right in the middle of the visitor center and the sports center, creating a nice synergy between both of those. We feel like this could be a venue that could operate by itself with its own unique events, or it could also create synergies with activities that are going on at the sports center. The area you see in gray is the interior building. The area you see in the green and the brown is the outdoor seating, the white being the outdoor stage. So the benefit of a hybrid facility includes the flexibility of both indoor and outdoor. It also includes the shared spaces for dressing rooms, hospitality rooms, food and beverage, box office, ticket sales. It creates that without having to do 2 separate venues. And then we're looking at it as an opportunity for cost savings on design and construction and operations as well. This is a preliminary rendering. We did this for the TDF application and process. The building in the back is the indoor facility, and it's all connected, but what you're looking at in the forefront of the picture is the outdoor venue, which has the shared back of house in the middle, creating an opportunity for outdoor events as well as indoor events. And this is actually looking from the balcony of the sports center over top of that, which if that was to happen would be a great VIP space, and you could rent that out for probably a lot of money to corporate events and private individuals that would like to view the event from up there.
Like Caleb already sitting there.
That's right.
Sit like that.
Looking from a schedule standpoint, so we're trying to complete this project. Our goal would be to complete this at the same time as the sports center and open them both up at the same time in preparation for the celebratory year of 2026, which is going to obviously be a big year for our community. We believe that we can do that. If design can start in Q1 of 2024, we believe we can have it open and operating for 2026 Q1. So that's just a quick look at the schedule. Some of the benefits. We had Victus come in and do some workshops with the local user groups, and they held a 2-day workshop session, met with 12 organizations, and they had more than 20 participants that came and talked about what their needs were, what some of their events are that they do currently, what some of their projected events might be, and that allowed Victus to start to put together at least some preliminary financial impact and operating numbers. So they looked at competing venues in the market, they looked at programming and seating needs, operational revenues and expenses, and economic impact. This is just the first step. The next goal would be to look at regional and national events that might come here and also incorporate that into the study as well. But from what they've gathered so far, they're looking at over $11 million in new direct spending annually, approximately $900,000 in tax revenue annually, 7,500 additional room nights, over 100,000 annual visitors for weekday and weekend, and 35 sustainable jobs. Out of that 111,000 of annual visitors, they're projecting 40% of them will come outside a 50-mile radius, which is a good solid number. And that means that people are going to be coming in and they're probably going to make it an experience and an event. So they'll come in for the day, maybe they stay the night, and they go to some other events and activities the next day. It's far enough where they're going to be enticed to do that, get some meals, shop, and do things like that. They've projected 67 major ticketed events. So we know that there's already 90 plus events in Williamsburg right now. Some of those are smaller type festivals and activities. So they're looking at just 67 for major ticketed, not including some of those other smaller activities. These are events that will draw people in, pay ticketed prices, and it's broken up from ballet, orchestras, symphonies, indoor commercial events, and outdoor commercial events. And just to highlight, I mean, this facility can be used by a wide variety of groups and organizations from the region, including concerts and festivals, performing arts, Colonial Williamsburg, the city, sports center, entertainment, activities, speaking events. It could be a really great spot for commencements or celebrations, award ceremonies for the sports centers. So it would be a great synergy to that as well. So at that time, I'll open it up for any questions.
It's exciting to think about all that's being proposed on this site. I don't know that I have any questions because I know that we've got a long way to go, and certainly, like the conversation about sports, we will have additional decision to make on Thursday. But we're still early on. We haven't even talked about where the money's going to come forward to pay for this, but it strikes me that there's, as Mr. Hibbets has said, there's been a great deal of interest in some of our community partners, a lot of whom are here today, in support of building, performance venue. I think what I really like about what you're conceived here and proposing is both the indoor and outdoor aspect of it. I liked how you kind of changed it from the Astro, which is kind of back to back, to have it fit into the geography there. And then the tie-in to what we see at the sports venue and just the connectivity of it all. I think it really just set this off, a whole nother level. So I don't have any questions, but I look forward to supporting it and looking forward to working with all the folks in the community on helping us find ways to pay for it. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any questions. Again, as the mayor stated, how could you, if you look at the renderings and think about the possibilities, how could you not be excited about it? Also we've got to figure out where the funding comes from and the cost of such a facility. But as you've pointed out, another major driver for the community and to meet a big need in the community. But also, we have to realize that there's significant savings if we're able to afford the facilities being constructed at the same time. And again, to sit back and think about the sports complex and the live performance venue being unveiled at the same time, I think would be huge for this community.
Yeah, no questions. I just want to comment really on the thoughtfulness of what I'm hearing and seeing, and I think that's important as we move forward. And obviously, much the same thinking with the sports complex, but I think when you have, different types of performances and, in really taking the feedback of the community and those who would be using the space, like I see reflected in this, really trying to make intentional choices. And I think as we think about, how and whether and in what way to potentially pay for it, it's really thinking, you know what, we're doing this in a thoughtful way with the community's best interest at heart, and being very careful stewards of something that is so important to the community, and also being careful stewards of, you know, of the resources, like, in our community too. So I thank you for, you know, your level of really taking input, and also looking at taking the best of what you see out there in other places, and thinking about how can we make that even better and make it work for our community the best way possible. So I just really appreciate the intentionality and the thoughtfulness, like, going into to what may work best here.
Thank you.
Thank you, and just a couple comments to piggyback as far as the thoughtfulness and what would work best here. I think when, you know, seeing the Astro, it seemed a little cold, you know, to me, and having been in the Kimball Theater for a couple things recently, you can really feel sort of that warmth and intimacy, so I'm glad to see that looks like more wood and more warmth is being brought in, and I like the idea of actually having seats that can retract
Really
as
nice.
opposed to just chairs on a floor, on a flat floor. So I like that idea, and particularly, you know, I talked to you about, you know, community input and making sure that all of the interest of our local cultural organizations are represented, not only in the design and the construction, but in the operation and flexibility and openness for them to be able to schedule. And last but not least, what I think Vice Mayor Dent said, you know, being unveiled at the same time, not only unveiled at the same time, but unveiled in time for 2026. So, thank you.
Yeah, Rick, thank you for this presentation as well. Just maybe one quick question. Obviously, these are being presented back to back, but they're in very different parts of the timeline of potential dedication, right? Where we have an idea of the payment structure for the sports complex, whereas this is a very preliminary site plan review, really, not even with the same, you know, schematics that we have for sports. So can you give us an idea of, it's council's decision on Thursday to pass this to the HTRFA. What would be the next thing that comes back in front of the public for their consideration, particularly as it relates to LPV?
Well, and I don't want to speak too much for the city's behalf, but obviously we're anxious and ready to go. The question of funding obviously starts that process. But it would be our intention, as soon as there is some funding allocated towards that, maybe through the authority or wherever those channels might be, that we'll start immediately to put together some concepts and some drawings to do similar to what we did in the Sports Center, is to get to a 35% interim agreement. And then we can provide updating costs and pricing. Part of that process will include community engagement meetings, workshops, things like that. And we anticipate that probably being about a 6 to 9 month process, really dependent upon, you know, funding and allocations for that.
Well, it's clear from some of our participants, the community is already well engaged with the process. So I trust that would go well, and I appreciate all the work to hear. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Javits.
I just had one question, clarification. So the city council authorized funding through the TDF grants. So assuming that everything goes according to plan, that money would go to the HTRFA and then be used for the initial planning. Is that correct?
As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, we dedicated $100,000 each of this year and next year to go towards some of the initial planning. Well, the question for us Thursday is, do we want to send this proposal then to the HRTFA and let them decide on how to pay for it? Then they'll make a request of city council, working with our partners, and then kick off maybe potentially MEB and Clark Nexum to start designing.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else on this? No? Exciting. Thank you very much. Anything, council communication?
Only to invite the public to our holiday party on Thursday at 5:30. 5:30 kicks off the reception. The real exciting part will be honoring one particular member of the crowd, Mr. Bobby Braxton, with the Mace Bearer Award at 6. So please, everyone, join if you can.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we have an open forum. If anybody would like to come forward and speak, now's an opportunity. I see Bobby doesn't want to speak, but anybody else like to come up? Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
You'll just state your name for the record, please.
My name is John Kraffel. I'm a resident of City of Williamsburg. I just want to speak, and as I have before, this council, on the value of not only a performing arts center, but the vision that the city is putting together seems to me to be an extraordinary one that brings together all sorts of synergies, sacrificing or bringing together things that relate to entertainment, that relate to culture, that relate to sports. You're reaching across the entire range of family experiences. And I think that's such an extremely important thing to do. Everybody knows, you go anywhere in the country and they know Williamsburg, but they only think of it being the old city. And the truth of the matter is, this will bring lots of people in for lots of different reasons. And people will come in for sports things, but then attend a performance that night, or, other things like that. I think it's just so valuable that all of it's put together. And this is my first experience seeing the sports center, and it's clear that we're going for a home run there that will be something really dramatic, and it will really, really help to, I think, develop our city in a very positive way.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate those comments. Anybody else like to come forward? Said it, okay. Well, thank you. So I'll close the open forum, and I believe we have a matter for closed session. Mr. Vice Mayor?
I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one personnel matter per subparagraph 1 concerning appointments to boards and commissions, and one property matter per subparagraph 3 regarding disposition of commercial property, of which discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers? Aye. Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll go into closed session, and we'll return and adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Us back in open session.
I move to approve the certification of a closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia.
Second?
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.